Welcome back to the Drive Home Reviews podcast, where I review the movies that I have just seen as I am driving home from the theater. And you might be wondering why this episode has dropped the exact same time as another episode. I don't do that very often. I don't usually do a two episode drop day. But I felt I wanted to get this review out, and I wanted it to be out there for people. Whatever minor reach I might have, if I can convince people to get out and go see this movie and make sure this movie makes a lot of money and make sure it's successful and that it just doesn't disappear into the ether like a lot of really charming, heartfelt, honest and sincere films tend to do, then I feel I've done my part. And make no mistake, folks, this movie is all of that and more. I don't mean to oversell it, but I can only try to communicate to you the way I felt in the theater watching this. And the general feeling that I had is that this movie is too good for us. We cynical, ugly, hate-filled, angry people do not deserve a movie like this that appears to be 100% sincere. Do you know how rare that is? And that was one of the things watching it that really struck me, is that this movie is sincere. I don't know how else to describe it. Let me see if I can explain what I mean. And that is that, maybe it's me. Maybe, I'm an 80s, 90s kid, and commercials as entertainment was so dominant in my youth that maybe I just always expect that to be the way it is. From Masters of the Universe to Transformers to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Power Rangers and all the various things in between. Star Wars and every movie having a tie-in set of action figures. You just feel like that's the way it is. Even the most beautiful and, heartfelt Disney movie, whichever one you think of when you think of like the most beautiful Disney film of them all, you can't escape the fact that, yes, maybe that movie really did touch you and really had an important message, but at the same time, it's also trying to sell you toys and amusement park tickets and, new roller coasters and t-shirts and Happy Meals. And it has been a long time since I saw a movie that had a genuinely beautiful and simple story that touched your heart and didn't feel like it was trying to sell you something at the same time. I don't know. Maybe this is a success. Maybe we'll see Chic Detective Dolls. I wouldn't be surprised. But for this one beautiful moment in the cinema, it was just a movie that was trying to be sweet and loving. And what can I say? Old mean Mr. Brandon's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And damn, did I love this picture. And the thing about this movie is that this is one of those movies that one of the reasons I wanted to see it, aside from the fact that it looked cute, but one of the reasons I wanted to go see it was because I wanted to know how this happened. How did we get this movie?
Oh God, how this crazy wonderful thing happened to us?
Because, yeah, this seems to be on the surface, it's like, hi, this is a movie about talking sheep. Let's solve a murder. And you're like, I need to understand how this works. I need to know how this got made. How did they do this? You know, how do you walk into a production meeting and go, all right, listen, all right, here's my thing, all right? It's a murder mystery, but with sheep. And some guy, I always picture them, some guy with a big cigar sitting at the end goes, brilliant. You know, here's money. So it was mainly curiosity that got me to see it, aside from the fact that it really did look amazing and entertaining and, you know, all that. If you have not heard of this, then let me lay this out for you, because that is pretty much what this is. So this movie stars Hugh Jackman as a shepherd in, you know, just outside of a small little English village. His name is George, and he raises his sheep, and he loves his sheep. And his sheep are his entire life. He's named each one of them. He feels each one of them has a personality. Right away, they do a great job of establishing why we should care about this guy and his, you know, and his talking sheep, basically. Because as anybody who has pets will attest, depending on whatever kind of pet or animal you love and work with the most, you will agree that they have personalities and they have individual wants and needs and likes. You know, you can kind of lump them all together in one. You can lump dogs together and cats together and horses together. But if you spend time with them, you're like, no, this cat, this dog, this horse, whatever, they each have a personality. They have things that they like. They have behaviors. And again, we think of sheep in that very kind of dismissive, you know, all sheep are the same. I mean, this was a joke they tried to do in that Animal Farm piece of shit, which we'll talk about again here in a little bit, with the sheep just going along with everything until the one of them gets a haircut, and then he's like questioning, you know, another. Didn't talk about that in the review, but because it was so stupid. But anyway, that is how a lot of people see sheep, but Hugh Jackman sees them as individuals, and he gives them all names and respects them and treats them all, you know, like you would the members of your family, like any of us would do with our pets. And one of the quirks he does is at nightfall, as the sun's going down, he likes to read the murder mysteries. You know, Agatha Christie style mysteries. And, you know, we're introduced to all this in this really great prologue where he's writing a letter to someone we don't know yet. And, you know, introducing all the sheep and talking about, you know, reading them the mysteries. And he's like, oh, I know they're not really paying attention. You know, they're just listening. They just like the sound of my voice. They're not really getting it, you know, whatever. But then it turns out that, yes, the sheep actually are paying attention and are listening and are discussing amongst themselves, you know, the mysteries. So yes, when I say talking sheep, this isn't like a Disney movie where like he can hear them talk or certain people can hear them talk. You know, you will understand when you listen to your heart bullshit. It's one of those things where the animals talk to each other. I guess Babe is probably the closest comparison we can kind of come up with, you know. So the sheep love George and they love, you know, the mysteries, and George is just the best. I mean, great casting of Hugh Jackman. Everybody loves Hugh Jackman, and yeah, you can see why in this. And everything's going great until one night when George is found murdered outside of his trailer. And, you know, it is one of these classic British small village mysteries where everyone's a suspect. George, you know, had falling out or dealings with just about everybody in town. Everybody's got a secret, and it's up to the inept police officer, the one local police officer, played by Nicholas Braun, brilliantly, to solve the mystery. But he is hopelessly out of his depth. And so the sheep who love George take it upon themselves to help him investigate the mystery and solve it and find out who killed George. Again, this is a premise that when you hear it, even saying it out loud, you're like, how in the hell? Like, who? I was happy to find out that this came from a book. This is based on a book, and I know that is a genre of cozy mystery of, you know, animals solving mysteries or whatever. I know there's a bunch with cats solving mysteries and things like that. So I was glad to hear that there is a book that this is based on, and some guy just didn't come up with it and go, hey, I've got an idea for a movie. So yeah, that seems a little bit more plausible. Okay, so where to begin? Well, let's just break this down into little pieces. So first of all, fantastic cast. Again, Hugh Jackman I sometimes ask. I asked this when I reviewed Apex: is why did you pay, you know, Charlize Theron money for this, you know, basic nothing movie? And one could ask, you know, why pay Hugh Jackman money for this really small role? Because he is murdered pretty early on. And the answer is because you need Hugh Jackman. Is there anyone in Hollywood just so innately likable and lovable and just the person that you believe could spend their life tending to sheep and loving each of those sheep individually? Is there anybody in Hollywood who is more suited to that role than Hugh Jackman? If you can think of someone, you're a better person than I am, and I also might think you could be lying. So, yeah, this is why you get Hugh Jackman even for this small role. All the other character actors in this are great. The standouts, again, are Nicholas Braun as the bumbling local police inspector who's tasked now with solving a murder, which he's never had to do. And I really like, it would have been so easy to make this guy just a complete idiot. And he starts out a little bit foolish. But I like that he gradually evolves into a clever detective. And he does make the connections. And he does, you know, he ends up solving the murder with logical deductive reasoning. And when you start at one point and you end at the other, you feel like there might be some kind of logic jump somewhere in between, but there's not. It's a gradual thing, and part of it is him discovering what he can do, and part of it is believing in himself, and, you know, it's really well done. He does a great job. Another standout, Molly Gordon, who plays Hugh Jackman's estranged daughter, who shows up in town and throws everything kind of off. Of course, she's the most likely suspect. You know, she's really good. I don't want to get too much into it because I think this is a movie that you need to experience on your own. It's not even so much worried about spoilers as it is not wanting to ruin the experience of someone's performance. And everything she has to play is very difficult, and you kind of go back and forth on her, but she does a really beautiful job. You know, the other actors in town are great. Emma Thompson shows up for a brief cameo as a snarky lawyer who's hilarious and scene stealing. But they're British actors doing British actor things. You know, you know the cast is going to be good. But let's be clear here. The stars of this movie are its title characters, the sheep detectives. You're here for the sheep. And what an amazing group they got together. The movie pretty much focuses on three. You got the main sheep, Lily, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus. You've got Mopel, played by Chris O'Dowd, and you have Sebastian, who's this kind of a strange ram that we find out that Hugh Jackman rescued from a carnival and brought. He's kind of aloof from the others, and part of the story is him connecting with them, and he's played by Bryan Cranston. And there are three main sheep. They're not the only ones, of course, because this has just a great cast of actors seemingly having a ball playing sheep. Patrick Stewart, Regina Hall, Brent Goldstein plays two twin brother rams who like to bash into things. Rhys Darby, Bella Ramsey. Yeah, just a great cast and a bunch of very unique, fun characters. And if all this movie wanted to be was a clever whodunit told from the point of view of sheep, it would have been fine. If that's what you're looking for, you're going to get it. It's a really good mystery. I like the way, again, when you're working with talking animals, there's always this challenge of where is the line? Where is this too unbelievable? And I like that for the most part, you see that these are the things that animals might assume, that the conclusions they might come to, you know. So yeah, and the mystery itself is very good. If you're like me, my parents and we love mystery shows, and my parents especially introduced me to all these great kind of British small village kind of quirky mysteries, things like, you know, Queens of Mystery, Agatha Raisin, Death in Paradise. So if you're familiar with those kind of cozy British village mysteries, you're gonna love this, because it is great. I almost half expected Humphrey from Death in Paradise to come staggering about, and if Nicholas Braun came out and said that was one of his inspirations for the character, I'd be like, yeah, that tracks. So yeah, the mystery is fantastic. It's well done. It does keep you guessing. So if you're a mystery buff, it's there. But this movie decides, no, it's actually going to go deeper. And it's going to deal with some things, you know, fairly philosophical. And this movie is also about the ending of innocence and the choice of ignorance or knowledge. So one of the things we're introduced to right away is that when something unpleasant happens that the sheep don't like, they can make the choice to forget. They can forget things that they don't want to remember. The only one this is not true of, and they don't really explain how they do this or why it doesn't work for Mopel. He is the only one who does not forget, either because he chooses not to or because he physically can't. They don't bother explaining that, and it's fine. You don't need it. And, you know, things like they have this mythology, the sheep have this mythology about rain, you know, the sound of thunder. Okay, don't be afraid of thunder, because what that is are sheep in the sky who see that, you know, the ground needs watering, and they get mad and they stomp their hooves, and that's what makes the rain. And they have this belief system that, you know, sheep become clouds. They don't even understand the concept of death. You know, they have these little lambs who keep asking, well, what's death? Do we die? And they're like, no, of course we don't. We become clouds. And Mopel is like, yeah, sure, that's what happens. And this film is, a lot of this movie is about these sheep, and Lily especially, who is our main sheep. She's the one that's kind of the smartest and solves the mysteries that George reads them. It has her starting to challenge that and have to come to grips with, yes, it'd be great if you could forget painful things, but if you do that, you also lose a certain amount of the happy things. You know, because when George dies, the first thing they want to do is, well, we're just going to forget George. And Sebastian, played by Bryan Cranston, says, no, you're not going to forget George. I'm not going to let you forget George. And I kept thinking of this from the point of view of seeing a kid watch this. And for a lot of us, I can't speak to youth nowadays, but I know for a lot of us in the 80s, we were really introduced to the concept of death at a very early age through entertainment. 80s films did not fuck around.
It was the 80s. Stuff got real.
This was the 80s, man. There were no helmets. It was a wild place.
I mean, ask any kid who saw it in our youth about that horse in the Never-Ending Story. You know, ask us about Littlefoot's mom. You know, kids, you know, the generation after me, they had Simba's dad. My generation had Littlefoot's mom. You know, so we were introduced to death and the concept of it and dealing with it and processing it fairly early on. And I kept watching this movie. I kept trying to imagine myself as a kid and thinking, this is a wonderful movie to try to explain the feeling of losing someone to a child who has never really experienced it, or maybe has and doesn't know how to process it. And it does it in such a sweet and simple and honest way, in a way that never feels saccharine, doesn't feel like they're just throwing cliches at you. It is true. I did not expect to tear up the amount of times I did watching The Sheep Detective. That was not on my list of probable things that were going to happen. But damn it, I did. If at nothing else, just the pure beauty at which they handled it. This film also handles things like in the sheep community, you know, about racism and about excluding people for dumb reasons. You know, one of the things they talk about is winter lambs. I don't know how true this is. This might be very true. That sheep that are born in the winter, for some reason, sheep society kind of shuns a little bit for whatever reason. It's odd that if this is true, it's interesting that they have that mentality, that they can think in something like that much of an abstract term. And so one of the characters in this is a winter sheep, or a winter lamb, who is little, and you know, the big sheep don't want anything to do with it. They won't let the little lambs play with it. And it's alone, and it's cold, and it's sad, but it's trying to tell them things, and they're not listening. And it's when they start listening to this person, you know, that's how well they characterize these creatures. That's when clues start falling into place. And it's this lesson of inclusion and making people part of your family. And again, handled so simply and yet so effectively. And this could apply again to teaching kids about racism, teaching kids about, you know, blended families. You know, it really could teach kids a lot. And even, you know, again, you might be thrown off by the murder aspect of it. And yes, George is murdered, but it's not a gory death. It's not, you know, it's as best it can be, it's handled tastefully. And You know, another thing about this, there is nary a fart joke to be had. There's no fart jokes. There's no poop jokes. Nobody steps in or slips on a sheep poop, which, given the situation and the creatures involved, you can understand why that might be in there. Nope, this movie never takes the cheap way. It never goes for the easy answer. There's some slapstick. The raised Darby sheep, especially Wool Eyes, is a bit of a klutz and, is bouncing around with that wonderful raised Darby voice. Oh, yeah, what's over here? Oh, I can't do it. But if you've heard him on Bob's Burgers, you know what I'm talking about.
Buttle? Yeah. Where I'm from, we call it buttle rubbies. Should I talk about the robot? A robot, Prezi, could turn into a plane. It's us, right? Aren't we the Waggies?
When do you go back to New Zealand?
I live here now. I've moved here.
Well, you're not welcome.
Oh, that's not right.
So yeah, it does a little bit of the slapstick, but it never, no one gets hit in the balls. Like, every cheap joke that lesser films, even lesser films featuring barnyard animals, would take, thinking that, oh, this will appeal to the kids. This movie says no. It feels like, in the best way, an 80s movie, in that it doesn't talk down to its audience. Simple does not mean stupid or dumbed down. And it's shocking how few movies or pieces of popular entertainment understand that. Like, what this movie really reminds me of? Babe is like a close proximity, but even Babe was a little darker than this one. It didn't quite have the coherent plot. This actually reminds me of early, 60s and whatnot Disney live action movies. Things like The Shaggy Dog, or That Darn Cat, or Pollyanna. And yes, Disney has always been about making a buck, but those films never felt as obvious about it as some of their animated counterparts would grow to be. It really does feel like something from another time. The film feels very, almost anachronistic, it doesn't belong here. It's something from a much purer time, whenever that was. I know a purer time never actually existed, but this movie, let me put it to you this, I believe this movie could lift Thor's hammer. I believe this movie would be worthy. Or this is the Spider-Man of movies, pure at heart, dealing with hard things, but doing it all with the best of intentions and all from a pure standpoint. So yeah, again, I'm hoping I haven't oversold it, and if you go see it and you're disappointed, I don't want to hype it up too much. But folks, I've been so angry at so many movies lately of just the audacity, the shamelessness, the commitment to being mediocre, and how we swallow that just so much. We swallow so much of the shit that the studios pile on us. And to see this and to really feel, holy crap, this movie's not trying to manipulate me. This movie isn't trying to get me to buy something. It's not trying to coast by on a familiar name. It's just its own thing, and it's content with being the most beautiful and honest and sincere and pure version of that it possibly can. I love this movie. I can honestly say that I absolutely adore this movie. And again, part of the reason I'm bringing this episode out at the same time as Mortal Kombat is because if you hear this, I'm begging you, go see this movie. Go watch it. This movie needs to be seen, and it needs to be recognized for the great. It's not just an oddity. It's not another talking animal movie. There's so much more to it, and it deserves to have an audience. So I implore you to go see this movie. Please make a point to do it. Take the family and go and enjoy a truly good time at the movies for everyone. I'm begging you to do this. So let's wrap this up before I kiss this movie's ass even more than I already have. So, final grade for The Sheep Detectives. This should come as no shock given the review. It is an A+. It's an A+. I cannot think of a thing that is wrong with it. I can't think of an issue I had with it. I can't think of anything I felt watching this other than pure joy. So, yeah. I don't think it's flawless. I don't think it's maybe going to be life-changing or anything, but damn is it a good time. Damn is it a good time. And you know what's funny? Two things I'll leave you with. Number one, isn't it funny the kind of circular nature that these things sometimes take? One of the absolute worst, most god-awful, most criminally created films that I've not just seen this year, but I've seen any year, is about talking barnyard animals. And one of the front runners for Best Picture of the Year, in my opinion, is also about talking barnyard animals. Kind of interesting how that, there's a nice symmetry to that. And the last thing I'll leave you with is this. It's still a more faithful adaptation of George Orwell's work than the Andy Serkis Animal Farm. Okay, so thank you for coming along. Thanks for listening. Hope you're doing well. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.